Whew. Thanks for keeping an eye on the campfire while I was out there. I didn't mean to be gone so long, but boy, my back teeth was floating. Hey, where's everybody else? Gone to bed already? What, did they all get sleepy at the same time? That's odd. But I guess we're all pretty tired after that long day of hiking around in the woods. Oh, you ain't tired just yet? Me neither. Well, maybe I was earlier, but I guess I perked up a bit after the sun went down. Always was kind of a night owl, you know? Say, since it's just us sitting up around the fire now, you're not by chance a fan of scary stories by firelight, are you? Yeah? Know any good ones? Real hair raisers? Can't think of any just now? Well, how about you hand me another beer, and while you try to remember some of your best nightmare material, I'll tell you a few of my own stories. I seen this funny looking dog once. Now, don't look at me like that. Do you seriously think I'd be out here, in these woods at night, with this beer in my hand and no moon in the sky, and nothing to see by but this campfire, and have the goddamn balls to tell you a story about somebody's snaggletooth woodpile mutt? Oh no. This one'll make your butthole pucker. So no shit, there I was, walking home from a friend's place a few years back. We'd been drinking, but I wasn't hammered or anything. Just a little more limber, and maybe a bit hungry, you know? So I'm walking down the street, and it's ass 30 in the morning, so absolutely nobody is outside. I can tell some people is still up from the lights of their TVs in the windows, but they ain't nobody moving around outside. And keep in mind that as late as this was, it was a full moon that night, and so everything I could see was as clear as broad daylight. Lots of shadows all over the place, but a lot of wide open spaces, and plenty of light to see by, too. So I'm walking, and I may be half a mile from home, when I suddenly get this chill all over my body. Not that creepy feeling like you get when something's watching you or anything like that. It was more like that chill you get when you think about the feeling that something's watching you. And when that chill ran over me, I just stopped walking. Stopped right there in the middle of the street, dead still. Tried to look around me to see what might be off, but I wanted to do it without moving my head at all, you know? Then I seen something. It was off to my right, up against the house I was walking past. There was this funny looking dog stood up against the side of this house and looking in the window. You know how when a dog wants to see over a fence or something, and it stands up on its back legs and leans on the fence with its front paws? Well, that's what this funny looking dog was doing. Just standing up against the side of the house and looking into the window. Sounds normal, right? And it was a big old dog. Like one of them, Irish wolfhounds. Long, tall, got sort of shaggy short fur, kind of rangy looking. It seemed normal enough on its own. But then I turned my head and actually looked at it. I seen a lot of dogs. All different kinds. Seen 'em standing and sitting and laying down and stood up against the side of things. This dog didn't look right. The shape was right, and the way it looked was right. Looked just like a regular old dog staring in that window. But something about how it was looking in the window was just wrong. To me, it felt just the same as if I'd seen a person standing outside a window at night and looking in. Then it turned its head and looked at me. Looked me dead in the eye. And then it opened its mouth and hung its tongue out in this big doofy-looking doggy grin. And that's when the shit got weird. Because right after it made that grin at me, its eyes started glowing sky blue. And I don't mean like when you shine a light on an animal in the dark and its eyes glow. This wasn't that. I've seen that a million times, and this wasn't that. Those eyes was glowing blue, like they was lit up from the inside. I could see the barest blue glow on the fur right around those eyes. It made my blood run cold. But that wasn't the worst of it. After it looked at me, it turned back to looking in that window again. And then it stood upright. Stood up as straight and tall as a man. And then it threw its head back. I mean all the way back. Pointing straight up at the sky and then over onto the back of its neck. Like there was no bones holding it up and its neck was no more solid than a sock full of mud. And it's just standing there now, straight and tall and with its head hanging upside down over its back. And it turned its head and looked at me again with those creepy glowing blue eyes. Only they was even more spooky now from being in an upside down head. And then I guess you might say it started twitching. Twitching all over. Like in some kind of horror movie where they show something moving real fast, but it's mostly just standing still, and they speed it up to make it look like it's moving real fast. Well, that's what this thing did. Twitching and vibrating for maybe 2 seconds, and then the head turned itself upright, and I heard this crunching and crackling sound as its back legs sort of twisted around. And the same thing happened with the front legs, only now they looked a lot more like arms. And when it was done twitching, it was just a standing there with its head and arms and legs on backwards. That's when I realized what had been off about it from the start. No tail. Not even a stubble one. Not then, and not after the twitching stopped. So now it's just standing there all croggled and bent, but still recognizable for what it had been. And it looked at me for maybe 30 seconds, and then it just walked off. Walked off down the street like it was taking a Sunday stroll. I just stood there and watched it until it turned the corner and disappeared. And then I hauled ass the rest of the way home, and I didn't sleep for 2 days. Real funny looking dog. How about you? Think of anything creepy yet? No? Well, I got another one for you. That is, if you're up to hearing another one. I didn't weird you out too bad with the first one, did I? Alrighty then. You ever hear of a knot deer? Oh boy howdy. You're gonna love this one. This happened maybe a year or so after I seen that funny looking dog. I got over that by then, I think, and I didn't have much of a problem going outside late at night anymore. I just kept telling myself I'd had a lot more to drink that night than I'd thought, and it had me seeing things that wasn't there. So like I said, this happened maybe a year later. Sometimes I like to take a drive at night and go to this place I know of where you can't see nothing built by man. It's this big empty field, all surrounded by trees, and the whole damn place has been overrun with kudzu vines. Yeah, that stuff. Grows so fast you can almost hear it. Climbs up trees and all over the ground and basically covers up everything. You get a grove of trees overgrown with kudzu, and it gets to looking like one of those abandoned jungle temples you see on TV. But what I like about this place is that there's absolutely no man-made light nearby, so it's the best place I know of for stargazing. You go out there with a six-pack on a moonless night with no clouds, and just kick back and watch the sky. I've seen my share of shooting stars out in that kudzu waste, let me tell you. The only problem with that place, though, is the deer. You see, since there's pretty much no ground cover except for the kudzu, and it's mostly just a big old field, there's not much holding the soil together, and so the whole place is washed out and shot through with these deep gullies and ravines. Some places, it's wide enough and deep enough you can get a small herd of deer down in one, and the whole place is so grown over that it all looks flat, until you see deer just start rising right out of the ground. Real unnerving the first time you see it happening, but you get used to it. And the deer out there love eating kudzu, so there's a lot of them out there. But generally, they won't bother you. So I'm out at this place one fine dark night, lounging in the back of my truck and slowly making my way through a six-pack and watching the sky, when I hear some rustling noises off to one side. At first I didn't think nothing of it, because it sounded just like deer noises. But it was pretty close by, and after a second I started getting curious about it. So I found my flashlight and got ready to turn it on, and I waited. I figured if the sounds got closer, I'd see what it was, and if they went away, why I could leave the light off and not have to wait for my vision to readjust. So I wait, and I wait, and just as I'm starting to think that maybe I was just imagining it all, I hear the noises start up again and start coming closer. It couldn't have been more than 20 feet away when I finally decided I wanted to see what was going on out there, because I could also hear it breathing, and it didn't sound quite right for a deer. So I turn on the light, and I shine it out where I thought the noises was coming from. And just then I see this set of antlers poking up out of the kudzu. It looked like flat ground, but there must have been a gully underneath the vines, because that deer just slid up into view like it was coming up a flight of stairs, right up through the vines and onto the flat ground not 20 feet from where I was. Now, I'm sure you've seen a deer at least once in your life. They got a certain shape to them, and you can look at it and say with certainty, that's a deer. This wasn't a deer. I started getting that vibe as soon as the antlers came up into view. The antlers were smooth and kind of pointy, like you see on wall-mounted trophy bucks. But at that time of year, all the bucks is still in velvet, so their antlers is kind of rounded at the end and covered in short velvety fur. This deer's antlers didn't have that. The eyes was wrong too. You flash a light on a deer's eyes in the dark, and they shine white. This thing's eyes didn't shine at all. Just two pools of inky black where the eyes should have been. And they was facing forward. They was where they ought to have been on the deer's head, but not pointing where they ought to. They was both looking forward, at me. The rest of this thing looked more or less like a deer should. And then I saw the legs. They didn't look right at all. I'm pretty sure they each had an extra joint, or an extra bone, or something. They looked all kinds of wrong. And the back legs was too short, and the front ones was too long, and they stuck out to the side kinda. Not bow-legged, but like they wasn't stuck on the right way to begin with. I want to say they moved more like a spider's legs than anything else. They didn't look like spider legs though, just sort of moved that way. So this thing is standing there, close enough to hit with a beer can, just staring at me. And I'm staring at it, and the longer I look at it, the less like a deer it feels. Imagine a little kid, just old enough for the really big box of crayons, and this kid's fairly good at drawing people, but they ain't never seen a deer. So you tell this kid all about deer, how they look, how they act, how many legs and all that, and have this kid draw you a picture of a deer. Now, make that into a real thing. That's what I saw that night. I don't know what in the hell it was, but it for damn sure wasn't a deer. It was close, in the same way that a toilet and a fire hydrant are close. You could use the hydrant as a toilet if you need to, but that toilet ain't gonna work like a fire hydrant no matter how much you want it to. I was real close to just climbing into the cab of my truck and rolling on out of there. And then this knot deer stood up on its back legs. Stood right up like a man. I didn't think of it at the time, but later it reminded me so much of that funny looking dog and the way it had stood up. And it's just standing there, and our heads are at the same level now that it's up on its back legs. And then it spoke to me. Opened its mouth up and spoke. Clear as a bell. It spoke like people do. And it said, "There's no turning back from this." And it said it in my own voice. And then it spread its front legs, only they looked a lot more like arms now. Spread them wide open like it wanted to give somebody a great big hug. And then it tipped its head up to the sky and started screaming. Sounded like half a dozen people all being burned alive at once. And it kept on screaming like that, just standing where it was with its arms out, screaming at the sky. I didn't stay to see if it had anything else to say. I jumped into the cab of my truck and booked it the hell out of there. Ain't been back since. You okay? I can't tell for sure on account of the firelight flickering, but you look a little pale and sickly. Just a chill? You sure? Alrighty then. You come up with a story yet? It don't have to top mine. I hope for your sake you ain't had nothing that weird happen to you directly. But surely you gotta be able to dredge up something spooky. Nothing still? Okay, I'll tell one more. But after that it's your turn to carry the torch, and it better be good. So this next one ain't something that I've seen up close, thank heaven. I've seen enough weird shit already, more than I really want to. They're these things, we'll call them Flesh-Pedestrians, for want of a better term. It conveys the idea well enough. You'll only ever see 'em alone. Never in pairs or groups. Always alone. They look like people. At first, anyway. But they don't always look quite like people. You might see someone standing on a street corner some evening, just sorta staring at nothing in particular. Nothing too odd about that. Only when you go past the same place again, they're still standing in the exact same spot, doing exactly the same kind of not a damn thing. And something about them don't seem right. Something's off. You could look at them as long as you want to, and never put your finger on quite what's wrong with them. Not in the moment, anyway. Later on, you might remember some detail about them that should have been obvious at the time, but only popped into your head well after the fact. And good luck trying to describe their specific appearance. they got a way of affecting the mind, making it so that you can't really remember what they looked like, only that they didn't seem quite like they belonged where they were. They mostly don't talk, and if they do, it sounds weirdly accented, or kind of lispy or distorted. Like they know how talking works, but can't quite do it right. At least, that holds true for the young ones. Or maybe it'd be better to call them the newer ones. The ones with less experience. Because they do learn. Whatever they are, they do learn. And what they're trying to learn is how to be like people. And how to be people. You ever been with a group of people? Going to a party or someplace? And when you get there, there's always that one person there that nobody seems to know who they are, or who invited them, and nobody remembers exactly when they showed up? They might have even showed up with the rest of the group you came with, only you can't remember when they fell in with you, or where. That's how the cleverer ones blend in. That's how they learn more, by becoming part of a group. And when they've learned enough, when they know enough about how to be people, at least as far as they're concerned with being anything, then they start looking for food. It's people, of course. They eat people. But part of that process of eating involves replacing people. They take on the persona of their food for a time afterwards, you see. First they try to blend in with a group, get to know them, get to know their habits and how they interact. Then they start picking out which ones are sort of on the edges of the group, which ones tend to spend more time on their own, and those are the ones they go for. Now, there's two things to note about these Flesh-Pedestrians. The first is that when they're after their prey, when they've got someone cut out from the rest of the group and they start actively chasing after them, they make a sound, a hunting call, sort of like a wolf, only it don't sound like a real wolf, or any other natural critter for that matter. It's just a sound that, well, it makes you feel like you're being hunted. And that hunting call has a way of sounding really far off, just as they're getting closest to you. If they're far off, it'll sound closer, just to scare you into running away and tiring yourself out. But when it sounds like you might be finally putting some distance between you and whatever's hunting you, that's when they're closest of all. The other thing to remember is a sort of a weird quirk they have. You see, they know when folk are starting to get suspicious of them, and when their act isn't doing so well. Usually, they'll just sort of fade out of sight behind something and lose themselves if they're with a group. But if they're alone with their chosen victim when the deception is discovered, and they realize they've been rumbled, there's a long moment during which everything goes quiet. Every noise around them, every noise around you, every noise you might try to make. Everything goes dead silent. That's how you know the shit's about to get serious. Anyway, that's about all of what I know about Flesh-Pedestrians. Or at least, all I can remember on the spur of the moment. So, what have you got to follow that? That's a real odd question to be asking. There's 6 of us out here. You, me, and the 4 folks over yonder in the tents. Did you forget how many people you was camping with? You want me to tell you their names, and your name. I don't think I like where this is going. Oh, and now you can't remember my name? But you do remember that your vehicle only seats 5 people, and y'all only drove the one vehicle out here?
Well then, it looks like we got us a bit of a problem. More specifically, it looks like you got a bit of a problem. Yep, you got me. I'm the odd man out. Didn't come out here on the drive with the rest of y'all. I just sorta fell in with you while you was out on your hike this evening. Everybody else seemed to take it in stride. They never did figure it out. I guess you're just a bit cleverer than them, is all. This is probably about the point where you ought to start running.
But I'll tell you what. You've been such a good sport about sitting here, listening to me ramble on about this and that. You start running now, and I promise I won't start chasing after you until after I've had done with those 4 folks over yonder, the ones sleeping in the tents. But you want to make the most of that head start. You surely do. 'Cause like the Not Deer said,
there's no turning back from this.